The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, UNU Productions, and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. It's Tuesday night, and this is Armed Radio, and you're listening to 2AT Second Amendment Talk. I'm Daniel Sanders, and joining me is Rod Burks. Rod, how you doing this evening?
Man, it's the best day of my life. Thanks for asking, Dana.
Excellent, excellent. So as we always do at the start of every show here, we're going to give a big shout out to the troops, all the service members deployed overseas and serving on the home front. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work and come home safe. Everybody's rooting for you. We're going to roll right into it. We got a lot to talk about this evening, and the first thing we're going to talk about, this actually has just started showing up in the news, and I can't for the life of me figure out why, as great a story as this is, why it's just now showing up. But Keanon Lowe, former football player for the University of Oregon Ducks and analyst for the San Francisco 49ers, currently working at a Portland high school. And new security footage from the school is coming out that shows a student armed with a shotgun coming in, and Keanon Lowe disarming him, no shots fired, nobody injured, getting the shotgun away from him. And then after he gets the shotgun away from him, they're standing in the hallway, and they just they basically just hug for like a minute. It starts out, looking at the video, Keanon Lowe is basically just holding him in what appears to be, just trying to restrain him and keep him under control. But then it turns into a just straight up bro hug kind of moment where it looks like the student just kind of realizes what he's done, and he just breaks down and everything. It's great in the fact that nobody was injured. According to everything that I've read about the story so far, the student, 17-year-old student, showed up with the intention of committing suicide. Said that there was only one shell loaded in the shotgun, and it was marked May 17th, 2019. That's when this whole thing took place. May 17th, 2019. One shell that was marked, and reportedly even attempted to pull the trigger, and the shotgun never discharged. It's actually a really, really great story. And I'm trying for the life of me to figure out why it's taken 5 months for this story to come out.
Well, Daniel, I feel it's because it didn't grab headlines, because it is I guess, a happy ending. It could have been much worse, of course. This young man is obviously struggling with something, and to it's more a mental health issue, and I think that's maybe that's why it's taken so long to grab a hold of this, because they want tragedy, they want something that's terrifying and helps them promote their own personal agenda.
Right. Now it says the student has been in custody since May, and at the time this article on NBC News was written that I'm pulling this information from, which was it's not giving. There we go. This article is dated as of October 19th. So it says, as of last week, he pleaded guilty to... Where'd it go? Here it goes. Pleaded guilty to 2 charges related to having a loaded gun in public. So I actually read a breakdown of the charges. I don't think he was charged with anything related to having a firearm on school property or anything like that. But it does say that he was placed on 36 months of probation as well as immediate mental health and substance abuse treatment.
Wait. So that's right. So he had a gun in a gun-free zone, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, we're not going to charge him with it." Maybe because it would show that gun-free zones don't work.
That does that as sad as it sounds, that does make a lot of sense.
Maybe they should make them, United States a drug-free zone too. No.
Wait, didn't we try that once already with? I know, we definitely tried it way back in the early 1900s with this thing called Prohibition, where we were trying to ban and outlaw alcohol, and I'm pretty sure that we've had similar things go on with illegal drugs, narcotics, things like that.
Yeah, and thank God for the moonshiners. Shine on, my friend, shine on. Because I love to have a cold one every now and then, and hey, judge me if you like, but it's probably my second favorite pastimes.
But yeah, I'm like I said, I'm really glad that we finally got a story in the news related to what could have been a potential tragedy that has played out to the good. I'm going to go on a quick tangent here. I don't understand why we as a society would rather receive bad news than good news. Because that's the whole thing. If you remember the movie Anchorman with Will Ferrell, don't report the truth. Just tell the people what they want to hear. And
absolutely, yeah, the tragedy is thrilling. People, it gives us a rush. And I had this thought while you were talking just now. I wonder if the gentleman that intervened in that school that had the wherewithal to take the firearm from the young man. I mean, I didn't hear any audio when I saw it, so I don't know if the young man that had the firearm was just saying, "Hey, yeah, this is just for me," or if the gentleman who took it away from him was just like, "Hey, man, give me that." I'm also curious to know. I mean, where does that get bred into somebody? Was he prior military, or is it just something that some people have?
You'll have to. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm having technical issues or if or if what it is. But you started talking, and then unfortunately you cut out a few words into it. So unfortunately, I didn't hear everything that you said there.
Oh no. Yeah, I guess the question is, where did he get the wherewithal to step in and make a difference in taking the firearm away from that young man?
Right. Yeah, and there was something I was reading. Here we go. And this is from that same NBC News article. It says, Keenan Lowe, former star wide receiver for the University of Oregon Ducks, who works at Parkrose High as a security guard and football and track and field coach, said he saw something in the student's face. Quote, "The look in his eyes, I looked at the gun and I realized it was a real gun, and then my instincts just took over." So on top of being a coach for the school, he also doubles as a security guard there.
And that's great. I think every faculty in a school should kind of fill that role. I mean, because they're going to be the first, really honestly, the first responders to a school shooting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, we talked about it last week. The schools that are allowing teachers to be armed, pretty much in that sense, they're making the teachers and faculty at the school the first line of defense against a potential school shooter.
Yeah, and I think that's it's the best response I've heard anybody to the problem of stopping school shootings. I don't condone the activities, obviously. I love my rights as a United States citizen to own and bear arms. And I love my children. So I think in my mind, what would happen, and I want somebody there with my children in the schools who knows how to use their firearm for good, because that's the only way you're going to stop the guy that's using it for bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, plain and simple. And that's I don't know if you saw this interview or not between Beto O'Rourke and Allison Camerota from CNN. And I'm actually really surprised. Yes, this is coming from CNN. I'm really surprised at this. She is interviewing Beto O'Rourke about his proposed gun buyback program. And she is actually grilling him over this stuff. I mean, she is chewing his ass completely up one side and down the other. And one of the questions she asked him, how do you plan to get assault weapons away from people who don't want to give them up? His response was, as with any law in this country, we would expect our fellow Americans to follow the law. We're a nation of laws, and no person is above the law. No matter how much they disagree with a given law, this is the right thing to do, and I fully expect my fellow Americans to follow the law. And her response, like I said, this is what surprised me, especially with it coming from CNN. Her response was, you expect mass shooters to follow the law. Congressmen, mass shooters, by definition, they don't follow the law.
Yeah, I saw that, and I almost felt bad for the guy. Honestly, I think he's committed political suicide by trying to take a hard stance with essentially depriving people of their rights. Not to say that people's rights aren't taken away every day, but for him to just make a blatant statement to say that, hey, if you have one of these particular types of firearms, we're going to come and get them. Yeah, not a good way to make friends on the playground. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean there's more than just him. Pocahontas, Elizabeth Harris, she's during the Democratic debate recently, she basically kind of hinted at a lot of the same thing, without really saying so much as we're going to confiscate your guns. I think her proposed idea was treating weapons like the AR-15 the same way we treated machine guns way back when, just taxing them to the point that the average person can't afford them. Which,
that's interesting, because the tax stamps that are required for machine guns and suppressors and things of that nature was introduced, I believe it was like 1934, and at the time they put a $200 tax stamp on owning these items. And at the time, $200 was a lot of money. And well, now today, I think, the data I was looking at was 2 years ago. I think as of 2017, there were over almost 1.5 million suppressors in the United States owned by civilians and corporations.
That's interesting to know that. I mean, I do know some individuals that own suppressors, legally own suppressors, and yeah, that's interesting to know that the given I truthfully expected the number to be a lot lower than that, because I know that I've looked into it as far as the Class 3 licenses and everything for owning fully automatic weapons and everything. It's such a stringent background check and everything that you have to go through to be able to obtain one of those licenses to get one of those. I realize suppressors and machine guns, we're talking about two totally different animals here, because...
And the BATFE is they're one and the same, though, essentially, because but one is designed to protect your hearing. However, Hollywood has taken this concept and run with it, and every suppressor you've ever seen in every movie is silent. They even call them silencers. They actually don't silence anything. All they do is reduce the noise. I mean, even with a supersonic round flying overhead, you pull at the rifle range, right? Flies over your head, you hear it crack. A suppressor's not going to get rid of that. But my point is that suppressors are very beneficial for a number of reasons, especially if you're teaching new shooters, and so it reduces the recoil because it reduces the decibels, the sound down. You have somebody who's less likely to flinch or heel the next time they go to take a shot, because the bang, instinctively will frighten people, and then they just, you have to then spend all kinds of time trying to train that out of them before you can really start focusing on fundamentals. So suppressors have a lot of value, and they're very useful, and I think they're becoming more affordable every day. Now the wait for them is still can be quite long. I think the ATF had at one time an online option to file for your to do your Form 4s. What else? Yeah, the Form 4s and basically register a to begin the process. I believe that has since come down. I'd have to take a second and look it up real quick.
Yeah, I've got everyone's favorite source website to pull information from, Wikipedia, right here, and that is actually what you were talking about. If you go on Wikipedia and you type in suppressor, it redirects to a page entitled silencer with firearms in parentheses. And then it says a silencer, also known as a sound suppressor, or sound moderator, is a muzzle device that reduces the acoustic intensity of the muzzle report and eliminates muzzle flash when a firearm or air gun is discharged by modulating the speed of gas ejection from the muzzle and hence suppressing the muzzle blast. Like a muzzle brake, a silencer can be a detachable accessory mounted separately onto the muzzle or an integral part of the barrel. And like you, I hate the term silencer used to reference a suppressor on a firearm, because I've shot several firearms with a suppressor, and really and truly the only time I've shot one where you couldn't really actually hear the muzzle report was using a .22 long rifle pistol with subsonic ammunition.
Right, and subsonic ammunition for anybody that doesn't know, is just one that stays below about, I think it's 1,200 feet per second at sea level, so that it's moving with a lot less speed. And again, it's great for training, for target practice, because subsonic rounds are much more predictable, whereas the supersonic 22, your accuracy tends to decrease just a little bit. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The only thing that it's really silencing is a really slow, really lightweight round. That's it's not designed for hunting, or hunting anything bigger than maybe small rodents like squirrel or mice.
Right. And using that particular firearm, that 22 with the subsonic ammunition, the only thing you could hear was the cycling action of the firearm itself. But now once we got up into using larger caliber handguns, and I even shot an AR with a suppressor on it. You still hear that report. Basically, as you were saying, the only thing a suppressor is really designed for is to protect one's hearing. It's still recommended that you wear some level of hearing protection while you're using a suppressor. In my personal opinion, it is anyways. But that was the whole thing. They had the HR 367, the Hearing Protection Act of 2017, which Congress was trying to pass, that would basically eliminate the need for BATF regulation the way they have it now with sound suppressors, where you have to go through this waiting list with a background check with a 200. It basically removed all of that, and you could go into a gun store and buy a suppressor pretty much the same way as you could just buying a regular firearm. You still had to fill out the ATF form for background check, but there was no months-long waiting list. There was no extra money involved in it. It was just whatever the cost of the suppressor was, that's what you paid, and then you were in and out and done with it.
Yeah, and the Hearing Conservation Act was a brilliant idea, and it surprises me that, in 1902, Hiram Maxim, he invented silencers suppressors for firearms, in lockstep with another one of his inventions. And I think maybe a majority of our listeners are familiar with the muffler on their car. So the same person who created the invention that is mandated by the government to come on every vehicle that is purchased, also invented the suppressor, which is heavily regulated and almost cost prohibitive for most people to be able to own. So it doesn't make sense at all. And honestly, I don't know. I did a search earlier of suppressors that were used in the commission of crimes. And I don't know what date it was from, but it said that annually it's about 44, and with over 1 million or 1.4 million suppressors in the United States, 44 in a year. It doesn't sound like an implement that's really being designed to use by criminals. But it is absolutely great for new shooters, I think, and can actually benefit the sport.
Yeah, absolutely, and. Just from the health aspect of it, the hearing protection aspect of it, I know a lot of people that hunt that once this act was even brought up, the first time it was brought up, a lot of my friends that hunt, they were tickled to death because, on top of, as you said, it reducing recoil, suppressing the sound and everything like that, that was the biggest thing that they were interested in. It suppresses the sound. Some of them were looking at it from the aspect of, it suppresses the sound. If I miss with my first shot, I'm going to have a second shot. well, if you're hunting and you're properly camouflaged and everything, and you miss with your first shot, then you might need to take a few extra trips to the range.
Hey, you say that, but I'm guilty. But I do hunt suppressed, and he's absolutely right. I have overestimated the range to a target, sighted in, pulled the trigger, and swing and a miss, and the deer's still standing right there staring at me like, "What you doing?" So I let him have it. But my point is that it happens to the best of us. But we came to terms.
Now I was just I did not know this until just a few minutes before showtime, but as of October 1st, hunting with suppressors became legal in Alabama. They became the 34th state to allow hunters to legally possess a suppressed firearm in the field while hunting. Of the 34 states, Montana and Florida restrict their use to certain types of animals or firearms. But for the other 32 states on that list, according to basically what I'm reading there, and this is from the American Suppressor Association website, those two states, Montana and Florida, restrict their use, as I said, to certain types of animals or firearms. So my understanding of that is the other 32 states say, yeah, if you can afford to have a suppressor and you want to use it, if you want to use it on a friggin', Remington 700 308 to go shoot that squirrel with while you're in the field, by all means.
Man, so I guess for listeners who are interested in getting a suppressor, the first thing you need to do is find one that's going to suit your application. Like Daniel said, are you going to be using this on a high power, high velocity bolt action gun, or is this going to be something that you're going to want to use on several platforms? Or are you more likely to use it on a pistol? So all of these things are things to take into consideration, because you've got different construction of the cans, as they're endearingly called, and each has its own purpose, right? I've got a pistol can that's aluminum, which is great because it's lightweight, but if I try to shoot supersonic large, like anything 30 caliber above, supersonic through it, I'm liable to cause it to disassemble itself from the inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as I said, I've had experience working with actual suppressors that are designed and built for use on firearms. What about, I want to know if you personally have ever dealt with oil can suppressors.
I've seen videos, and they are also equally heavily regulated. And well, actually, it's the adapter, and it has to be serialized. You still have to do the Form 1 if you're going to make it yourself, and submit it and be approved. Which the Form 1 tend to go a little faster, from my understanding, than the Form 4, which is the Form 4 is if you're purchasing it from a dealer. So let's say you find your firearm, or even your oil can adapter. You still have to fill out all of the required paperwork, and choose whether you're going to do it as an individual, as a trust, or a corporation. The trust is kind of my preferred method, because you don't have to do the fingerprints. You can add people to it that may want to use the suppressor, and you don't have to be around whenever they use it. So if you want to add family members, or whatever. So the and also pay your $200 tax stamp. So the trust adds a little bit of cost to it, but I think it is well worth it, because you only have to do one trust, and then you could buy several suppressors using that same trust, but you still have to go through the process of paying the $200 tax stamp for every suppressor.
Right. Now, have you personally ever used a oil can suppressor on any of your firearms, or any firearm you've ever shot one with, have you ever used an oil can suppressor? I'm curious to know how effective they actually are.
Yeah, well, in the video, no, I've never done it, but I saw some on YouTube, a guy doing it, and it seemed to be pretty effective, and a lot less expensive than some of your like your Gentech or Rugged or I can't think of any Dead Airs, things like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from a cost standpoint of, a standard, and I'm just spitballing here because I've never actually personally went and looked to price one, but this is just based on my basic knowledge of the subject. A standard suppressor for a firearm, you're going to be on the cheap end, somewhere in the neighborhood of $600-700 just for the suppressor, and then you add on the $200 tax stamp and everything else. Whereas with an oil can adapter, I think I've seen those go for like $100, $150, $200. So, you get the adapter and the $200 tax stamp. You're sitting pretty right at about $400 to $500, and then the cost of a oil canister, oil filter to put on the end of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's something that's very cost effective, but at the same time, I would have to, I'd be curious to see, how durable are they? A lot of the suppressors. One of the things I look at whenever I'm shopping for a suppressor is that that are they covered under warranty? And the reason I bought the particular model I did was because it even covers stupid. It's a lifetime guarantee, a lifetime warranty. So even if I were to run something through it that it wasn't rated for, they would still repair it and send it back to me free of charge. I'm sure I got to pay shipping or something, but I'm just trying to take it so I don't have to find out the hard way. But that is something to consider whenever shopping.
I didn't realize. I didn't realize somebody would, because it's my understanding that a suppressor over time wears down and then pretty much just becomes ineffective after so many shots fired.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like I was saying earlier, I think if I were to run a round through my can that it's not rated for, I don't think it would actually blow up the can unless I was running with something really big, really hot, really fast. But I think that the reason it's not rated for that is because the materials are going to degrade and make it less effective. And good thing about it, the really smart designers have made it so that you can service a suppressor without having to redo the whole process. Meaning that they put the serial number in a place that's pretty much indestructible, because that's really what you're registering. Whenever you submit your paperwork, you buy your suppressor, even though you don't get to take it home, and it's not really actually yours, even though you've paid for it. But you're basically telling the ATF that this suppressor is being transferred from this FFL or this manufacturer to you, and then that starts the process. And I believe in that process, so they receive it, they turn around, they also send it back to your state, who sends it to your whoever your chief law enforcement officer is in that area, and they have a certain amount of time to basically decline your request. So if they don't respond, then I guess it's automatically assumed that it's approved, and then it goes back to continue the further NICE, I think NICS or NCIS, I can't remember the acronym. The deeper dive on the checks,
Right. So yeah, that's I'm going to have to personally do a little bit more research myself into all of that. But we're going to we're going to move on to the next topic here. And this has been this story has been all over. I won't say all over the news, but it's been coming in and out of the news a lot here lately about an elderly crossing guard at a school. Elderly man who works as a school crossing guard at a school in Massachusetts was recently the victim of red flag laws. He is a Korean War veteran, former law enforcement officer, currently working as a school crossing guard, and this is in Tisbury, Massachusetts. He was relieved of his duties after he was having a conversation with a friend at a local diner, complaining to his friend about the school resource officer actually leaving the school to go get a cup of coffee or something while children are arriving at the school. And he made the remark to his friend about somebody could come in and shoot up the school while he's doing this, which, you know, personally I agree with. The school resource officer, his duty is to, once he arrives at the school, that is his charge. He's there to guard and protect those children, and especially in the morning time while kids are showing up at school, if he's leaving the grounds to go get a cup of coffee or a donut, whatever it is he's doing, he is abandoning his duties. But
yeah, it's your fifth general order. Quit your post when properly relieved.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I really want to say that all red flag laws are bad and that they are absolutely unconstitutional. At the same time, though, I've got a friend that we discuss things and we don't always see things eye to eye. But he did help me realize that we take people's rights all the time. But the Constitution does provide in there one thing, and it states due process, right? So people, I think, okay, yeah, maybe they should be allowed to remove firearms from somebody they feel is a threat. But what is that due process? And that's what we as a nation need to kind of sit down and figure out is when, do you get it before or after, and what is the process? What is the burden of proof? And what are the consequences for people who use the tool to get back at somebody? I overheard this person say this. Was it legit? And if it's proven to be patently false, then what kind of consequences are there?
Well, I think in that particular case, the consequences should be the same as somebody filing a false report or something along those lines. And that's what happened in this particular case. Was while he was sitting at the diner talking with his friend and making the comment that, if the SRO abandons his post, somebody could come in and shoot up the school. A waitress overheard part of the conversation. A waitress at the diner overheard part of the conversation, and this is the worst part of it. She didn't immediately go right then and there. She didn't go once her shift was over and report it. She waited 2 days to report and file a complaint on this school crossing guard making this statement.
Yeah, and they should have afforded the crossing guard the same amount of time to at least be heard, protest in front of a judge that, hey, look, this is a misunderstanding and I'm not a threat. Actually, that's my job, is to help protect these students and people who are using the those crosswalks or what have you.
Right. So under Massachusetts red flag laws, police showed up at his house and seized his firearms and firearms license. The firearms that were seized from him at that time were turned over to his son-in-law. Now, this all happened, I want to say this all happened like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that. And recently, I was reading the story, and I can't find the story that I was reading it on. But recently, he was pretty much exonerated of any wrongdoing. He was reinstated as a school crossing guard, but in the story that I read, he was still being made to surrender and sell his firearms.
Okay, so for any of our listeners out there that find themselves in a situation where they're being required to give up their firearms, please give them to me, and we'll talk offline about all of this stuff. So in all seriousness, yeah, absolutely. If you have somebody you trust and you can give your firearms to them, absolutely do that instead of giving them to the government or to law enforcement, because you don't know if you're ever going to see it again.
Right. Now, I wanted to do a little bit of research on red flag laws, and again, I'm back on everybody's favorite source website here, Wikipedia, and I've got a page pulled up on red flag law. I personally did not know that 1999 Connecticut was the first state to enact a quote-unquote red flag law. This says in 1999, Connecticut was the first to enact the red flag law following a rampage shooting at the Connecticut Lottery. Of course, 1999, I was 12 years old, and I didn't really care much about watching the news back then and everything. But the next state to do it was Indiana in 2005, then followed by California in 2014, Washington in 2016, and Oregon in 2017. As of August 2019, there are 17 states and the District of Columbia that have passed some form of red flag law. And the majority of those 17 states have been after the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida. You now have...
Right, and everybody's quick to point the finger and say, oh, well, this person, dropped the ball, and I get it. And I understand if somebody's been adjudicated as mentally deficient, or whatever the term is, whatever the legal jargon is, basically saying that, they shouldn't have a firearm or be allowed access to one. As long as they get their day in court to at least fight it. I was, as you were talking about the red flag laws, I pulled one up, and it talks about a small arsenal of firearms seized from an alleged neo-Nazi leader under Washington State's red flag law. And then I scrolled down, and it's this young kid, and his arsenal included an AK-47 and 3 pistols. So if that's a small arsenal, man, I think I'm doing pretty good. I guess he's a self-proclaimed neo-Nazi group leader who is allegedly gearing up for a race war. So it's this 24-year-old gentleman, and I've got to wonder, was he just running his mouth on Facebook, being a keyboard warrior? Or is he legit trying to hurt somebody? But I guess my point is this: who starts a race war with a OK rifle and a few pistols? I'm not convinced that the red flag law in this case was deemed necessary.
Right. And I'm sitting here looking under a subsection on this page on Wikipedia called Provisions. It says the specific provisions of red flag laws differ from state to state on issues such as who may petition for a risk protection order. For example, in Indiana, only law enforcement may petition for an order. In contrast, in Oregon, any person living with the person of concern may file a petition. California legislature passed a measure in 2016 to allow high school and college employees, co-workers, and mental health professionals to file such petitions, but this legislation was vetoed by Governor Jerry Brown. Similar legislation, however, was signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom in 2019, and the legislation goes into effect on January 1st, 2020. And it expands the list of people who may request GVROs to include an employer of the subject of the petition, a coworker of the subject of the petition, if they have had, quote, substantial and regular interactions with the subject for at least 1 year and have obtained approval of the employer, and an employee or teacher of a school that the subject has attended for the last 6 months if the employee or teacher has obtained approval of the administrators. It says, in California, it is a misdemeanor offense for a person to file a GVRO petition knowing the information in the petition to be false or with the intent to harass. So, California is taking the stance of, if you work with this person, if you employ this person, if you taught this person at a school for X amount of months, so on and so forth, and you feel that they are a justified threat, you can file a petition to have their firearms taken away from them. And I do not agree with that. You're basically giving the average Joe judicial power over somebody. And as we've seen time and time again throughout history, people abuse power.
Yeah, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here first. So let's say you did have the courage to approach somebody who you felt was a threat. You say, hey man, I think maybe you need to back off your whatever it is that's causing you to suspect that they may be a mass shooter or what have you. Then what is your recourse? I guess my question really boils down to, my refined question is, why do we need a red flag law? Why can't we just go to law enforcement and report what it is that we observed and why we felt it was a threat? Let them investigate it. Give that person an opportunity to defend themselves. That instead of being guilty until proven innocent, give them a chance to prove they're innocent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest issues that we have as a nation, is we have lost the presumption of innocence. We are no longer a nation of we no longer give individuals the presumption of innocence. It's now, you're guilty and you have to prove your innocence. The burden of proof, somewhere along the way, the burden of proof has shifted. And I would really, really like to find out where the scales got tipped there.
A lot of people have in mind and a lot of one size fits all, that doesn't have a clearly defined boundary, right? Because power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you don't restrict how these red flag laws are used, and how they're really different, and make them clearly defined, you're really giving a tool to the wrong people to abuse.
Yeah, and like I said in that page on Wikipedia, in California, it is a misdemeanor offense for a person to file a GVRO petition knowing the information to be false or with the intent to harass. Well, what is the penalty for that misdemeanor offense? I mean, is it what is it? Because really and truly, a misdemeanor offense in comparison to what's going on, you're basically just getting a slap on the wrist. Okay, you told a lie, bad, don't do it again.
Right. I think speeding is depending on how many miles an hour you're going over. That's a misdemeanor, so you can be hit with some pretty heavy fines. It's possible. Hit people in their bank account. Yeah,
hit them in the bank account, but in comparison to what's going on, okay, so hypothetical, I file a false report on you and have your firearms taken away. I have your rights infringed upon. Your constitutional rights have been infringed upon just simply because of the fact that we got into an argument over how long I borrowed your rake for. And now you're having to go through months and months of process and paperwork and litigation to try and get your rights restored. And in the meantime, all I gotta do is pay $200, $300, $500, whatever the case may be. Okay, whatever. I'll go sit in court for a couple hours, let the judge rant and rave. Here you go, here's my check. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, but we got to hope that the rational person wouldn't go to this. But you're absolutely right. I've had clients that have had all-out disputes with neighbors. I mean, as far as giving each other, putting restraining orders on each other, which also, at least in the state of South Carolina, I'm pretty sure it's nationwide. But if you are the named party on a restraining order, you are not allowed to own, purchase, possess firearms of any type. So yeah, I mean, and I think that's why I go back to, it really needs to be defined that hey, this is how you can use this. This is not how it's to be used, and the consequences for this. But there are other petty ways, I guess, people can use the law to restrict your rights. Like restraining order or false allegations, red flags, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the biggest issues I see whenever I'm doing research on something like this is, they don't clearly define anything at all, really. The law is not black and white. The law is gray and murky, and nothing is really clearly defined. As I pointed out before the show started to you, we were talking, and I'd mentioned somebody had said something about this law where it says after notice and a hearing. Well, nowhere in there does it say that the subject of this potential order is the one who receives notice and is entitled to a hearing. The way it's written out, it could be the immediate family member gives notice to the courts, and the court holds a hearing with the immediate family member on why this individual's rights should be restricted. And then they just show up, kick down the door, and take his guns.
Right. Yeah, and I understand. And I think the article I think you're referring to, or the comments were more about showing that there is a process, a due process, but it's just not clearly defined. I mean, people can lose their rights very easily. They can go to jail before being found guilty in a court of law, and before and if they're found guilty, then they go to prison. So the Constitution is not absolute, I guess, in the sense that because felons can't own or possess or purchase firearms. People who have been dishonorably discharged, minors, and a few others. So just to say that everybody has the right to bear arms or arms, it's not completely true. So for the only thing Constitution does really guarantee is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we have the death penalty. So even life, which is listed in the Constitution as a right. Yeah, we can take that away from you too. When I say we, I mean our government. So Yeah, and really the point is that as long as we have due process, as long as you, as let's say, if you're the subject of one of these red flag laws, as long as you have the opportunity to be heard and defend yourself, and hopefully be able to get your property back, it needs to be spelled out. How much authority do they have over us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have to end it there. We're running short on time. Going to take the opportunity again to plug our Facebook page, 2AT-Second Amendment Talk. Go on Facebook, like us, follow us, interact with us, talk with us. If you hate us, however you feel, we don't care. I'm also going to take the opportunity to plug your page for 2AT, Second Amendment Training. And, go on there. You've got you've got training videos and stuff that you've put on there and everything that I've seen. Yeah, look him up on there. Look up 2AT, 2AT Second Amendment Talk, both on Facebook. And like I said, just interact with us. We want to hear from y'all. So I got nothing more. Rod, you got anything?
No, I'd like to thank all of our listeners and God bless you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, big shout out to the troops serving overseas and serving on the home front. We appreciate everything you do. Keep up the good work. Come home safe. Everybody's rooting for you. I'm Daniel Sanders for Rod Burks. You've been listening to 2AT, Second Amendment Talk on Armed Radio. Thanks for listening, everybody.